Okay, so this is a Firelake or Shenandoah slide out disassembly, and then we'll show you how to test all the components. So first of all, you put it in a vise. If you really want to get all the garbage out of it before you even get started, you could put 110 volts to both your terminals here and neutral to this one or ground. And what that'll do is it'll turn the heaters on and open your solenoid and allow for the oil to drain out. Now with that said, here we go. So at this point we're going to disassemble everything on this thing. Got a nice little pipe wrench here. This is your oil inlet. Normally there's a regulator on here. I just removed the regulator for disassembly purposes, but there's your reg. That's your oil regulator. Now the only way you wouldn't have an oil regulator is if you have what's called a fixed speed pump. A fixed speed pump doesn't need an oil regulator because the way it works is it pumps the same amount of oil every time, whether it's thick oil, thin oil, whatever. So we take this bushing out, or this pipe nipple. We'll remove our oil solenoid. This is our oil solenoid here. It is identical to the air solenoid in a Firelake, but the air solenoid is in a different part of the furnace burner. So E-clip, then we remove this magnetic magnet, and we'll take apart, we'll loosen up the terminals. Now the whole reason we're disassembling these slide outs is because what happens here is there's a series of heaters in here and passageways that the air and the oil travel through. When the air and the oil are traveling through, it's heating them both up. It heats the air only when the unit is running, but it heats the oil all the time. The oil, actually, the heaters are hooked to a thermostat that is screwed into the end of the block. So what happens is when it hits that temperature in the block, it shuts the heater off. When it needs to, when the temperature drops in the block, it brings the heater back on. It's that simple. Okay, so next we just took off the electromagnet. Now we'll go ahead and remove the stem that the magnet sits on. Now there's also a little tiny clip right here. You don't want to lose this little guy. What this does is this is just an anti-vibration spring. It's just a tiny little spring that slides down there, and your electromagnet goes on there, and it just keeps a little pressure on it, so it keeps it from vibrating and keeps it from making noise. They will make a good amount of noise sometimes if that's not in. Now underneath this stem, you have a nucleus, this is called, and you have a little spring. What that's designed to do is keep it's closed all the time. And then when you send electricity to the magnet, it pulls that little piston up and lets oil pass through when the pump turns on. That you replace every time. We're going to do a new nucleus and spring, and then down inside here is a little washer, or I'm sorry, a little O-ring that we got to remove. So that's that. Then we'll remove that O-ring we just talked about. Might get that O-ring as well. Alright, so I'm going to dig this O-ring out with a pick. You can get a pick set at wherever. There's that O-ring. As you can see, it's actually round from new, but it conformed to the piston that goes down on it. Next we'll take off our copper line here. This is not hard whatsoever, but these things fit in kind of tough. So this is the copper line at the end when the oil has gone all the way through the system, all the way through the block and got nice and heated up. The last pass is through that copper line. So it's compression fittings, so it's a little tricky. You gotta kind of like you might end up bending it just a little bit. Just be careful with it. You don't want to kill it, but it's got compression fittings on it. And see the buildup of oil in there. That's why we're here today, folks. Now next, we have that done. Now we want to go ahead and just take all the electric off that we can. So as you can see, we have the heaters. The little black lines are heaters. The only components that you actually do not have to remove are the factory heavier wires here, the red, the blue, and the white. Those can stay hooked up. However, you do have to loosen any of them that have a thermostat or a heater hooked to them. Yeah, definitely. All this stuff I would recommend you take pictures of before you tear it apart, just because it's a little tricky. Now, Firelake, because they're awesome and build the best unit on the planet, you can go to their website. If you just Google Firelake waste oil furnaces and get to Firelake's site, there's several sites out there. You're not going for the one that, anyway, you want to go to the waste oil site and you will find very good PDF files on wire diagrams, the whole 9 yards, diagnosing. Firelake was the best company on the planet. They make the best waste oil burner, hands down. Everybody else is trying to catch up. Firelake built this thing right the first time and haven't had to change it. There's nobody else in the industry that can say they have the same burner today that they had 30 years ago. Firelake can. So now I have all my wires undone, and you'll see in a minute why we do this. We're about to remove this metal box from this whole assembly. I got one more set of wires here. So when you're to this point, now we got to get rid of this metal box. It actually comes off opposite of what you would think. So there's a screw here, and there's generally two on the bottom side, plus that fitting you got to remove. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that's my last screw out of the three of them. Now what we'll do is loosen our vise, and this bad boy slides totally out of there. Oh, I didn't take the fitting off. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. So now we slide our aluminum block out, and then all there is to do to this cover here, and I'll cover that later, is I'm probably stuck on a plug. See that? That's rough. So what I'll do is I'll take that plug out a while, even though that's usually a little further in the steps. But it's good that that plug doesn't go in deep. And again, I'll cover that here later. You don't want to drive those plugs in too deep into this block, because every time you drive that plug in a little deeper, eventually that plug, because it's a taper fit, it's a pipe thread, which is taper fit. Once you dig that in so deep, you're going to lose your ability to actually seal. So to remove that plug, you want to be very careful. This is a snap-on socket that is square. You want to sit in that plug and gently come out. And if you feel like that's going to strip, you stop. The last thing you want to do is strip that plug out. So now we have to stop and put some heat on that plug. Okay, so we're going to heat this plug up. Now you don't have to go too crazy on this. You do need heat, but remember, this is aluminum. The problem with heating up aluminum is it looks normal, and you can't tell exactly how hot you have it, and then it'll just start melting away. We're using a propane torch, so we're not super hot. We're not adding oxygen to the heat or anything. We're just looking to get this thing some heat to maybe loosen up the thread sealant that they use. Some people actually use Loctite. They should probably be punched in the face. But we use thread sealant here. So I try to get it nice and heat it up all the way around the plug. And remember, that's a square plug, so you would think that gives you your best grip. But to be honest with you, the socket doesn't quite fit the plug as good as you would think it does. So now we got a little heat on it. We're gonna see if we can't get her out of there. I got it. I did get it after all. I didn't have to drill it and use an easy out, which is great. That's a video for another day, because when you're easy out and plugs, you're in trouble. It can be done. I've never failed at taking a plug out, thank the good Lord, but it can be a hassle. Okay, so there's that plug out. Now, what's gonna happen? Two things. Look down in there. Look at all that garbage. Are you kidding me? So we made a solid diag on this. Somewhere along the line, my boys went out and replaced this slide out because they told the customer it's garbage. Look at him. Look at him. That bad boy is junk. So what happens is you're cleaning your nozzle, and you don't know why. Well, the reason being, that stuff's breaking loose and getting stuck all up in your nozzle. Don't get stuff stuck up in your nozzle. So now this will come right down. And that's it. So now what we're going to do with this, we'll clean this up a little bit and then we'll test the lights. But again, that'll be under component testing. We'll go over all that. You don't want to cheat at this point. If you look down in that elbow, you see you got to take every part out and you got to clean it. There is no cheating on this. If you cheat, you're still going to be up on a ladder cleaning nozzles because you're dumb. Don't be dumb. Listen to me. You got to clean every part of that. We actually had a customer who had a slide out in here last year, and this elbow right here was completely plugged. But he had bought the slide out as a completely reconditioned slide out. And he said he bought it from us. I called him and told him he didn't. We had a brief argument. He told me I was a liar and a thief. And then about 15 minutes later, he called me back to apologize. He had bought it from another company. I knew it wasn't ours because we don't cheat. We take everything apart and we make sure your stuff is high and tight. Now those two these are thermostats. They say right on them what the temperature is. That one there says L140. That's 140 degree thermostat, and the other one says L160. That is 160 degree thermostat. Again, these guys, the way it works is they send electricity through here, and when it's below 160 degrees, it will let electricity back out to the heater. Once the heater brings it up to 160 degrees, this thing opens and no longer lets the electricity flow to the heater, always maintaining good temp. Now, with that said, don't ever leave your slide outs on during the summertime. Always turn the heat off to always turn the electricity off to your heaters, for the simple reason you will singe that oil, you will burn that oil, and that's nowhere you want to be. Now these are kind of goofy fittings, so the way I'm taking them apart isn't exactly conventional, but it is what it is. They're kind of tough to get on. So again, now I will remove this elbow from this seat, or from this solenoid base, but I just want you to see. And again, look down in there, see all that junk. Also, These are all different elbows. Even though those two look similar, they are not the same elbow. So just remember which elbows came from where. Sorry I didn't cover that sooner, but you didn't tear yours apart yet anyway, so just back off. Now you'll see these plugs, every one of them plugs is going to come out. So now this particular heater just slides right out. And again, I'll have a video showing you how to test those heaters. Into the, it's a 3/16 square socket. That's the number I was looking for. But like I said, they don't fit awesome. So you want to make sure there's nothing keeping you from bottoming out on that plug, because you need every little bit of help you can get on that. So, take out all three of these plugs. Look at the junk on the end of that bad boy. Not open. Where's those line wrenches? Are they not? So you'll see garbage on the end of them plugs. We're going to clean all that out. 7/16 right. So now I'll be able to bring that right out of there. And again, you don't have to kill these heaters. They don't go into an oil port, even though we do put a little pipe dope on them just to be sure. They don't go into an oil port. Again, back in the day when these burners were designed, everybody else's heaters went into oil ports. So you'd pull them out and they would be singed as could be in there. Not Firelake, Shenandoah. They never did that. This just sits inside of the aluminum, aside of the ports that flow oil. Now, if you look down in the barrel of this bad boy, I don't know how well that's showing up on camera, but those oil ports are plugged. So this was a good diagnosis by my guys. This customer absolutely needed a new slide out. So I'm going to look around here. I got all the plugs out now. There was 3 up here, and I believe 2 or 3 on the body. Now, the last thing is the nozzle assembly. 9/64 are the Allen sizes on the end here, so that's a 9/64 socket. Now you wouldn't have to have this socket. You can use just a regular 9/64 Allen wrench. We just keep it handy here because we do a lot of them and we like convenient. So the way this works, behind this is two O-rings. They're called the nozzle gland O-rings. What you want to do is absolutely replace them every time. If you would be adjusting your oil or your air on a Firelake Shenandoah, and you see when you adjust the oil, the air goes up, and when you adjust the air, the oil moves. Not necessarily up, but whichever way you're going. If you see the one or the other moving while you're just adjusting the other one of these O-rings in the back of this is most likely your problem. It's leaking. This is where the oil and the air come together right at the nozzle. I'm going to throw this plug away. It's an 1/8" pipe plug. You can buy these from any hardware store. I'm throwing it away so I don't try to reuse it or have somebody try to reuse it because I know it's bad. Now back to this. Once you have those 4 screws out, just take your wrench of choice, pliers of choice. See, that's your one O-ring right there on the back side. That goes right here. And the other one is actually underneath that mess there. What I like to do is stab it real good. And see those, what happens is those get real hard and brittle and they lose their ability to seal real well. So now we took both those, that's called your nozzle gland O-rings, your small one and your large one. And then this plate just sits on front over those slots, over those flat spots, keeping that in place and bolted to the front of the slide out. Okay, so that's it. Now what we're gonna do is clean up. Clean up is not very hard as far as technical, but it is not fun to do. You just take your block, and the easiest thing to do, we use a carbon choke cleaner and soak them for 3 days. That's a possibility for you, but to be honest with you, oftentimes you can get it at Harbor Freight or anywhere you can find stainless steel wire brushes, and you just start, look at that. Start the process of cleaning this bad boy out. Now when it's plugged like this one is, I use a long drill bit and I run my drill down in there. I'll show you that in a second. So here's about a 10-12 inch drill bit. I just gently, don't mess up your threads here, but I use this because once you go so far in, it's hard to come around here, Caleb. Look down there. See that? That's what we're after. Yeah. We want to get all that junk out of there before we put it in our parts washer, because we don't want to contaminate our parts washer any more than we have to. Now that I ran the drill through, I'll slide my brush in as far as I can, but you'll notice it's still really, really stiff because my drill bit isn't quite the size of the bore. So I got a lot of work to do there. But again, the more you do of this by hand, the better. If not all of it, you could complete this all with just a little bit of a use of a solvent tank. So before you start with a wire brush, I buy a gun cleaning kit. You can get this gun cleaning kit at Walcrud, Walmart, or wherever it is you decide you want to buy a gun cleaning kit. You don't have to buy the good one because you're basically mangling this stuff. Now what you want to be careful of is if you would break something off in here, I'm not sure how you would get it out, because a lot of these are blind holes. That's why they have so many plugs in them. The holes are blind. They go down and they cut across, and that's when they need to drill a hole and put a threaded plug in where they cut across, where they change directions. So you can just take a little brake clean in there and gently work your way down, but like I said, do not get these brushes broke off in there or you're in trouble. Not gonna lie. Okay, so we come over here to our parts cleaner. Now then, I have a heated up ultrasonic parts cleaner that that's the destination of this thing eventually. And I use the old 1970s carbon choke cleaner that used to come in a 5-gallon bucket, and it has a basket to soak your carburetor. That's what I use, that old. Now, full disclosure, the new carbon choke cleaner does not work like the old stuff because our communist government got in the middle of it and made it that you can't make that good stuff anymore. Somebody somewhere might try to drink it. So they got rid of it. However, that was good stuff. What we use today though, if you heat it up and give it enough time, it works a little bit. But the trick to this is elbow grease. What you want to do here is use your solvent. Your solvent will break down that junk. So what I like to do is just, you saw how I struggled to push that brush through, but if you have your solvent helping clean the way, you can usually get her through there once or twice. And then once you start getting through, you're in pretty good shape. Okay, so now we have this thing, I can actually see down through all the ports real good. So I think it's safe to say it's ready for the tank. I was using that light, so. So when you look down through there, if you put the light here, put the light in that port. You can barely see it, man.
I can see it.
So down through there, you can get a good look at open ports. And again, those ports were not open 20 minutes ago. So now we're ready to soak it, and we'll let it soak for a couple days. You wouldn't have to though. Bear in mind, if you wanted this thing to be running today, all you'd have to do is some elbow grease with some gun cleaner and some wire brushes. Harbor Freight has a nice little kit of wire brushes. You can go ahead and get a kit out there for like $7. And the drill bit, all that stuff, none of it's very expensive. This is all about time and effort. Next video, I'll show you how to test each individual component. We'll get it all cleaned up, and then I'll show you how to reassemble a slide out. Thank you for watching. God bless.